Hello, Jenny.
Hi, Lori.
We're going to do another astrobiography today.
Yay.
What do you want to talk about?
We are going to talk about Billie Holiday.
Yay. All right. Billie Holiday is one of the all time greatest singers. And she was born in Philadelphia in 1915. She was born into poverty. She had a very difficult childhood. Do you want to say anything about that, or do we want to just leave it at she had a tough time?
Yeah, I just think it's good enough to know that she had a very traumatic childhood, and it was something that definitely sort of flavored her life throughout. Yeah. So, and I mean, I'll just go ahead and say it in part because she died very young. She died at 44. If you see pictures of her at that age, she looks much older. So that's sort of a testament to the incredible challenges that she had in her life and the abuse and the trauma that she always carried with her. So, yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, there's a lot interesting about her and about her life. And I think if we just open the chart up right away and just start looking at it and talking about it, it'll be a good learning tool for all of us.
Let's do it. Okay, so here
Yeah.
is her chart. Um, so she's in Aries, April 7th, 1915. Also, this is the start, very beginning of World War One, or at least a year into it. I'm only mentioning that because you'll see Saturn and Pluto are together, and that was something that was kind of kicked off the start of World War One. So that was the time frame in which she was born.
And
Yeah.
she let's see, what was it I was going to say? Oh, I know what I wanted to say. I just want to, for those of you that are new watching our videos, we do use whole sign house system. I just wanted to mention that in case you're using a different house system, this is what we use. So in looking at this chart, you know, one of the first things that comes across to me really like the first thing that I notice is that everything is below the horizon, mostly in this quadrant here. And that right off the bat is going to suggest a lot of difficulties in the early home life. And with it being in this eastern quadrant, it's going to that difficult childhood is likely to result in a lot of defensiveness, a lot of just a sense of the need to protect the self.
Yeah. I think probably the most obvious thing next that you're probably folks are tuning into is this massive stellium in Pisces.
Right.
So we have a lot of Pisces. So what does Pisces represent, Lori? What do you think of with Pisces?
Oh, Pisces is a really complicated, it's very complicated. It's hard to grasp hold of. I always think of Pisces like things are other than they seem. You try to grab hold of Pisces and it kind of slips through your fingers. You can think of the two fish swimming in two different directions. You know, you can't quite grab hold of them. But Pisces is, yeah, it's ruled by Neptune. It's a water sign. It's a mutable water sign. So it's very adaptable. It's very emotional. It's very deep. There's an intangibility about Pisces.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so, that kind of intangible, not quite seen clearly, that whole big gathering in the second house of her values, her self-worth, that kind of brings in this whole question of her self-worth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how did she see herself? And then you can immediately, in looking at that stellium, the thing that draws my eye from there is the trine from the stellium to Neptune to the midheaven and back to the stellium. That grand trine in water. This is a highly emotional person.
Yeah. And yeah, quite there's a volatility here too that you'll see. And I also just wanted to add to the Pisces thing. Another thing is when Pisces deals with woundedness a lot. Potentially, it carries the archetype of the victim, um, and there can be a little bit of kind of a sense of sacrifice or martyrdom that might come with that. Um, so, I mean, sacrifice can work a lot of different ways. It can be something for the greater good, but it also can mean sacrificing the self, not necessarily for the greater good. Pisces also kind of hints at perhaps some problems with addiction. Like with this much water in a chart, if I was counseling a client, we'd be having a conversation about just, how are they doing with that? Do they have a struggle with substances and
Right.
um,
And especially when you bring the ruling planet of Neptune into a trine to it,
yeah, whew.
this is either going to be somebody that struggles with those kind of victim, addictive type issues, or it's going to be a person who really functions on a very spiritual level.
Yeah. I think, don't you think with this, like, for Billie Holiday, this trine can describe both her singing and her ability to just touch people with her singing, but also her addiction problems. And she definitely had very serious struggle with, I mean, I think one of the quotes in the documentary that we're recommending was just something about how she just kept going. She just would do all the things, and she just would keep on going, and she'd perform. So it's just, whoo. I think that Grand Trine speaks about that.
And one of the things about this grand trine that's really interesting also is that it does not include the sun or the moon, which really changes the dynamic of a grand trine. And I can see this as sort of a defense mechanism, being able to play to her audience, being able to use, astrology is a symbolic language, so there's layers and layers of meaning. Yes, there's that addictive piece, which clearly she's known for. But there's also the voice, the kind of softness, the depth of her voice, which music is a part of. When I think of Pisces itself, I sort of think of a ladder. You can think of it from the bottom level of addiction and that kind of thing, going up the ladder into music and poetry and meditation, and all the way up into high mystical states. So she kind of sat there in that music and addictive space. And those are the two areas that she's known for. So, even in the midst of her addiction, she could get on stage and do her thing. And people were really drawn to that.
Yeah. I like to think about the ladder you're describing. That's a great description. I also like to think of it as like octaves. It's kind of those different octaves of the same energy, and that's what we're always looking at in astrology. And she very much is embodying those two different octaves of the same energy. But isn't it funny how we haven't even talked about the sun and moon yet?
I know. We'll get there in a minute. I want to say one more thing about the Pisces is, along with all those other things on that ladder that I think of, the thing that kind of encompasses it all is suffering. And her suffering was so evident, and how she brought the suffering of, not just herself, but the suffering of her people to her work.
Yeah.
I think suffering is a real key piece here as well. So now let's go to the sun and moon.
Yeah, because I think, Laurie, what you said just beautifully segues right into, the moon is in the 12th house of suffering. So, and the moon is in Capricorn. So there's a suggestion around having to be much too serious, much too young. One of the things the moon can suggest is things about your childhood. And in Capricorn, there's a seriousness. It suggests somehow that was missing. And you have highlighted here that she actually has a sun moon square, which is always I always think about with sun moon squares as a tension between inner and outer, or what you need and what you want. There's this constant interplay in the personality that shows up. So yeah, I think that has that.
And a square aspect always demands effort. You know, it always demands effort. You know, there's a part of her that probably really tries to stay in that flow of the trine. That's why she had the problems with addiction. She was trying to, that was a comfortable spot. She could kind of, you know, while she was doing her drugs or on stage singing, she could avoid this really difficult challenge, this difficult internal challenge. And we were talking earlier about that particular square between Capricorn and Aries. It's a strong one. I mean, those are both cardinal signs, and it's a hard struggle. I was talking earlier about in the course of my work with clients, when I see that combination, sun and moon, whether it be the moon in Capricorn or Aries, and you know the other one, the reverse, it's just a powerful, powerful combination. You are not going to see people with that combination that don't make something of their lives in one manner or another.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
It's a strong combination.
Yeah. It's also that square is the last quarter square in terms of the moon phase. If you're thinking about moon phases, it's the moon is, it's already been full and now it's creeping back towards the sun, and so it's in that darker phase. And some of the keywords for that are turning away or revising or basically just doing something different than whatever you were raised up in.
Yeah, letting go of the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just, yep.
There's a letting go of the past, moving toward the future, which is a perfect segue into the rising sign.
Right. So the rising sign brings us, here we have it as Aquarius. And so you have Uranus in Aquarius also ruling that ascendant. So that Uranus is the ruler of the chart. And it's just a very powerful first house placement for Uranus. So that's the power of disruption or awakening or kind of breaking away from tradition. And I just think about her song, Strange Fruit, which was really activism before its time, before the civil rights movement. And if you haven't heard Strange Fruit, you got to listen to it. It's haunting.
Prepare yourself emotionally before you listen.
Yeah. It's really intense. It is. So I think that I like how this kind of shows that, though. She was willing to play that song up on stage, which speaks about lynching of Black people and of slaves. Like, I mean, just it really encompasses that. It's a very emotional song. And the United States government came after her for that song, for performing that song. So just to really hold that rebellious, like, I am gonna bring this right to the forefront, to your face, to sing this.
And people would leave, would walk out. Time magazine wrote an article where they said, this is the strangest song you'll ever hear in a nightclub.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And then the United States government decided she was a problem. She was a big problem.
Yeah.
And went after her.
I think Laurie wrote this
to go after her because of the drugs.
Yeah, so it was like her Achilles heel.
Yeah.
It was a wound that they were able to.
Yeah. They were able to get her on that. But yeah, the fact that Uranus rules her Aquarius sun, her Aries sun, that's a pretty big statement. You know, the Aries sun in the third house, her voice. I mean, it's like she had to just say what she had to say.
Yeah. Yeah. Which actually brings me to what question I was going to pose is, when people are thinking about charts, it's like, so where is her singing in this? Like, where does that show up? We had a conversation about that before we started, and that was.
Yeah, I think it shows up in a bunch of different areas.
Yeah, me too.
You know, first of all, there's the Aries sun in the third house. So, you know, her voice is going to be her very courageous voice is going to be an area where she really learns about herself when she opens her mouth and lets come out what comes out. So that's a powerful piece. Where else do you see it, Jenny?
Well, I think an echo of that is the Mercury-Mars conjunction in Pisces as part of the larger stellium. And the fact that, so those two are together, so that's those two principles together, and the fact that Mars also rules the third house of what we're talking about with that Aries sun. So that, I think that underscores that again.
And also just the fact that the Mercury and Mars, which rule the sun and rule the third house of the voice, communication, the fact that those are both in Pisces really just adds that, the music, the Piscean, if she wasn't a musician, she would have been a poet.
Yeah. I think, well, so the next layer of that Mars and Mercury together is that it receives a square from Pluto and Saturn. So that really elevates that. It empowers it. Pluto's the empowerment symbol, and Saturn is the, like, let's get this done. And putting those two skin square to Mercury and Mars, it just really, it dramatically empowers the whole thing to bring it up.
Dramatically empowers it, and it dramatically, I see this as the government trying to shut down her voice too.
Totally.
She had to fight to use that voice in the way that she needed to use it.
Yeah.
Wow.
The other thing for those folks, learned some of the Noel Till methods, like that Pluto is at the Aries point. Oh. So it's at 0 Cancer, and that point, whether it's any of the cardinal signs, 0 Cancer or Aries or Capricorn or Libra, is a point where people tend to show up in public. They tend to be seen for, and that, I think that, I love that empowerment that shows up for her.
Yeah. And
everything else,
and that Pluto rules her midheaven. Yeah. I mean, with Scorpio on her midheaven is ruled by Pluto and Mars, and they are in a square aspect. So how do we know Billie Holiday? We know her from her voice and the fact that, the power of it and the trying to shut it down. If the government hadn't tried to shut her down, she might have just been a quiet singer somewhere, smoking her weed. And, initially she was just a super pothead. She just smoked pot. It was quite a ways into her career, I think, when she started really getting into.
Well, I think the hard drug stuff started to come in with her, really just honestly fucked up relationships that she was in. Like, she had a real struggle with that, and there's a discussion of like masochism where she almost sought out the most abusive relationships, and that is tied into her starting to get into cocaine, and I think just kind of anything, pills, and then she got into heroin, and she just ran it really hard. And she died of heart failure because she ran it so hard, and it's so sad because she really did have these really abusive men in her life, and over again, and each one, it seemed like it got worse, and the drugs got worse, and and she, in fact, she was planning to sign the divorce papers of her last husband, and she went into hospital, and she ended up passing away in the hospital and never got to sign those papers.
Yeah, and I think he got everything from her estate.
Yeah, really.
And he was not a good guy.
Yeah, so that kind of shows you that.
Definitely had some issues in her life, didn't she?
Yeah, she had some great struggles, and I think, like, as an astrologer looking at this chart, there's a lot of complexity in this chart. There's some other, we haven't outlined every single aspect, but if there's just already a lot of complexity here, and there's a couple other layers too. But we've kind of hit the highlights. We've hit most of the parts here. But one other thing I did want to add, that's right, I was just looking at my notes here. was that at one point they describe her psychologically, her tendencies of almost being sort of a psychopathic tendency. And the reason they were using that word is because it was incredibly impulsive, the things that she would do. I mean, even with some of her drug use, it was like thrusting her hand into a bowl of pills and taking them, like this very impulsive behavior. And I think that that kind of brings, it shows up as Aries, the Aries sun really showing that impulsiveness, or Pluto square
Aries,
Mars, like
Aries sun and that aspect of Uranus sextile.
yeah,
You know, there's something about that. I mean, Aries, I understand Aries fast motion kind of energy. And then you know, get Uranus tucked in with it. And it's like, it's going to go really to extremes. And that sun rules her seventh house. You know, there's her impulsiveness around partners and that as well. Huh.
yeah, that's good,
And
Lord.
you
Yeah.
said something that I wanted to make sure we mentioned here as well, in terms of the using the archetypes as, you know, just a simple sentence for somebody with sun, moon, and rising. What
Oh
was
yeah,
it? What was it that you said?
I was just picking out what archetypes I thought worked, and this it was the survivor, which is the Aries sun, with the heart of the grumbler, which I chose for the Capricorn as this person who was going to damn well use her fame to to make a statement about the awful treatment of people with, people of color throughout time in this country. So she damn well is going to do that. So I feel like the grumbler, almost in a good way. I've never thought of the grumbler as being good, but yes, it is. And then the last part with the Aquarius is the truth sayer. I'm going to get up here and I'm going to sing you the truth, and I'm going to have you're just going to sit there and listen, and
And
maybe
there
you're
was that, yeah, I think of that one scene where she's in a bar and they're all waiting to see if she's going to sing that song. They told her she can't sing that song. And there's police lined up in front of the bar watching her. And she starts singing the song and they carried her off. You know, that's the truth sayer. That's Aquarius on the ascendant. I'm going to do what I know I have to do. A powerful chart. And with
yeah,
so much
hard.
suffering, and yeah, it's a very sad chart, but I think that she paved the way in such powerful terms. If nothing else, that song, you know,
Yeah.
even if she had done nothing else. And there was stuff in there that just broke my heart about, you know, they'd make her wear blackface because she wasn't dark enough when they wanted her to be in this kind of position. You know, they wanted to keep her in this. It was very strange, some of the stuff that, well, yeah, she was born in 1915. Things are different now. In some ways better, in some ways not all that much different.
Right. Some ways just hidden beneath the surface. And then in some ways more obvious. But yeah.
Well,
Wow.
I'm happy for Billie Holiday having been a part of the world. And when was the first time you heard Billie Holiday music in your life that you remember?
Well, I think I just feel like my parents probably played it for me at some point. But it was really great, like getting reacquainted through watching this documentary and hearing it. And it's just totally, I mean, I just feel like haunting is probably the biggest word I would use to describe it.
She has such an interesting range. Her voice, it's so Piscean. It's just so Piscean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
otherworldly.
Yeah, it really
Yeah.
is. I remember when I was in my early 20s, I moved into a house in a whatever. I moved into this place, this little hippie house, and the person who owned the house had a huge collection of blues and jazz, old blues and jazz. And I remember finding Billie Holiday and Bessie Smith,
Oh, nice.
just immersing myself in that music. It's powerful, powerful stuff. It really is. So there's the documentary that you and I watched was on Amazon, just called Billie. There's a movie based on her life right now on Hulu called Billie Holiday versus the United States government. I haven't watched that one yet. There's also, there's a lot of documentary stuff just on YouTube about her. So any of you that want to kind of dig deeper into her life and experience, there's plenty to see. All right.
Okay.
I think we're all set then, Jenny.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Laurie.
Thank you. This has been really fun. We'll do it again.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Good.